All right, so you should have already read all of the information about value on Canvas, and you have a small task in class today to do value scales. Some of you guys have probably already done these, but I'm going to have you do them again. So I'm okay if you guys use Vine charcoal, compressed charcoal, or your black chalk pastels, but just those three. So I don't want you guys using what I'll be using as an example, because I want you to use something different to get a handle on it yourself. So I'll be using the graphite sticks. But whichever medium you choose, make sure that you're consistent throughout. So like if you use Vine charcoal, you want to use Vine charcoal all the way across for both of your value scales. Okay, so I went ahead and divided them into 1-inch squares, just like you're supposed to for the 5-step, and then again for the 10-step. You'll notice that you have, with a 5-step, a very middle, so that will be your actual midtone. But in the 10-step, you're going to have to split the middle, i.e. split the midtone. So you'll take what the very middle would be, which should be that, and then split it a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. I also labeled mine. First will be the white, or paper white, and then this will be your black, or the darkest you can get, and the same thing down here. Okay, so you'll also notice these notes that I made. So, hopefully you can see that. So, you don't want any halos in the boxes. That means just filling in the middle, and then filling in the middle and leaving the edges lighter. You want to make sure that each box is completely filled evenly. So you see how this is scribbly and you've got some white peeking through, same thing here. You want to make sure that your whole box is totally even and full. And you also want to make sure that the lines between each box disappear and the lines on the outside of the boxes disappear, so that you're getting that full, just a square without the outside or inside lines. So that way that you can really see the value move from one value to the next and how it breaks up. Okay, so what I would advise you do is start with your 5-step so you can establish your midtone, and then you can use that midtone down here to split the difference. And once you have your midtone, you'll be able to assess everything else based off of that. And you always want to start light, because it's easier to go darker than it is to erase and try to go back to white, or try to go back to something lighter than you've already put down. So you see that I'm using the side of my pencil again. You'll be using the side of your chalk pastel or compressed charcoal or your Vine charcoal. So I'm trying to achieve midtone, which is basically the very middle value between black and white, which is a nice even tone. Now, I've gotten enough down now that I'm going to step back and kind of blur my vision a little bit and see if I think that that looks fairly middle of the road. Is it too light or is it too dark? And if it is one or the other, you adjust accordingly. So I'm going to say that's probably a pretty decent midtone for now, and I can go back and clean it up and make it pretty later. So that means that my next box is going to be darker than that. And you'll notice that the 10-step is going to be more of an even progression. It'll still be blocky between steps, but it'll be way more even than what will happen between transitions from white to this tone, to the midtone, to that tone, to black. Because there's fewer steps, you'll have a bigger jump between squares. But you still want to make sure that the progression is even from black to white or white to black, no matter what. So I think that's pretty good. Now with my woodless graphite, I'm going to try to get as dark as I possibly can. And you know, if it works better for you to start with the midtone and then skip to the black, the darkest one you get, and then split the difference here in the middle, that's fine too. And again, just make sure that you're making nice even pressure. You're not grinding your medium into the paper, because if you go too dark too quickly, it's really hard to lighten it back up. So make sure that you're going in layers. Now I'm going to go back and see how this is speckled, so that there's places that are kind of white peeking through. I'm just going to go back and softly kind of add value to that. Now, if you want to be fancy, you can use your blending stumps, again using the edge there, to fill in those tiny little holes of white value that are peeking through.
Now I'm going to lightly layer here again.
I've switched to my 9B because it's darker. And again, I'm not using it like a crayon where I'm coloring. I'm still using the edge of it, just not the flat edge. I'm using a little bit of the sharpened edge just to get into the places that still look too light. And it helps to go, if you've noticed, I've been kind of doing what I call a basket weave, where you go in one direction and then you go back on top of it in another direction to kind of cover your bases and make everything even. And I think that's as dark as my woodless graphite is going to let me go. Of course, if you're using your compressed charcoal or your chalk pastel, you're going to get a lot darker. Okay, so now that I've got that done, I'm going to go back over here and see where I can go between white and the mid-tone and find that value. It's not going to take much. Again, you'll notice that I'm still going back and forth. One direction and the other direction. And I'm using very light pressure here because I want the value to be very light. Okay, I think that's good for now. So I'm going to step back and blur my vision and see if there's anything wrong with any of this. And what I'm noticing is I'm heavier handed on this side of each square than I am on this side. So you want to make sure that it's even all the way across your squares. So I'm going to come back and fill in a little bit over here. Same here. And then one more here. So now that when I step back from it a little bit and blur my vision, I can see that they're even. Okay, so now I'm going to take my eraser and clean up my edges. Now for those of you who are using the pastel, the black chalk pastel, or the vine charcoal, it's going to be a little bit messier than the than the compressed charcoal. Okay, so not perfect, but I want you guys to do your best to make sure that it's fairly perfect. So you see how these two, there's no more line, but they're not bleeding into one another. There's an abrupt difference between this and that. That's what I'm looking for, okay? And then when it comes to the 10 step, so we know that this is our mid-tone. So if we take that, we know that if we take the mid-tone and make it just a little bit darker, then that's going to be this one. And put my mid-tone there from above, from the 5-step. And see where I'm at. And that's about the same. So I'm going to make it just a tad darker, but still lighter than this one. Now, because it's easier to go darker than it is to go lighter, I'm going to leave that there for now. It's not perfect yet. And then I'm going to take this mid-tone, but go just a little bit lighter than that, but still darker than this one. You see how I'm doing each square individually? What you should not do is take the black and then smear it down this way, especially with your fingers, because your oils are gonna make shading a lot more difficult. The oils in your fingers, smearing value and medium around is just gonna make everything a little bit stickier than it has to be, and then it's gonna look blotchy and not smooth. So no blending with your finger across the blocks. You wanna do each block individually. I think I went a little dark on this corner, so I'm gonna take my kneaded eraser and pick up some of that medium, some of that value. And now it's a little blotchy, so I have to go back in and fix it. And since this is the black, is the darkest that I'm gonna be able to get, I'm gonna do the same thing here. So I'm gonna try to get that same darkness. Again, still using a very light hand. Now going back in and filling in those little spots that are shining through, the little white spaces of paper. Okay, so I'm going to go back and clean up my edges just so that we can see what we're working with here. Okay, so for the rest of it, you're essentially going to do the same thing that you would have done, or that you will do here, just you're going to have more boxes. So you could consider this and your black, your mid-tone and your black, and then split the difference and put it here, and then again split the difference here and split the difference here and do the same thing here. Just remember that you're keeping this empty, you're keeping it paper white, same thing here. And do your best to clean it up, make it nice looking. Make sure that where you can, you don't have lines that are showing. It's going to be a little harder in the lighter value, so that's okay. Just make sure that you don't have those halos, because that's worse than having a light, thin line going down between them. And if you feel like making everything smooth, you can use your blending stump or your chamois cloth. Just remember that you're not grinding your blending stump or your chamois cloth into your paper. You're using a light touch of the side, just like you would with woodless graphite or a pencil or whatever you're using.